So yeah, build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, because I am the problem. And when we're asking God to build with me, do with me as thou wilt, do the renovation within myself, it's all this bondage of self is that I need to kind of rip apart and try to relinquish. Back in, there's a solution. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes that have been the guiding forces of the lives of these men need to be suddenly cast aside, and a whole new set of conceptions begin to dominate them. That's the psychic change. That's what I'm looking for. That's what we're talking about. That I may better do thy will. So it's for this. It's so that I may better do God's will. Please take away my difficulties. These are my defects of character. My defects of character are what cause me all the pain in my life, and they're what make me fight you. But I fight myself first, and then I fight you. But we don't always see it like that because we've never had the awareness of our thinking like this program starts to show you. And without awareness in this program, none of this other shit really makes sense. It's just theory. And if it's a theory, you're in trouble. So to me, the awareness is of absolute importance in this program, to be aware of what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And you can't always see when you're stuck in self, though, because self is very cunning. But if you use your pillar system and you use inventory and you use the tools that this program affords, you can see that and eventually start developing a system to be more aware. So take away these difficulties, these defects of character that cause most of my difficulties in my life, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help with thy power, thy love, thy way of life. Victory over them. It's insinuating there's a fight here. It's not easy to relinquish these ideas and emotions and ways that I manage my life. It's not easy. It's going to be a fight. So that victory over them may bear witness. So I'm going to fight these things. That's what step 6 is about. We talk about, well, what is step 3? What is turning my will and my life over to the care of God? To me, in my opinion, from what I've connected in dots in this program, I seek through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for me and the power to carry out steps 6 and 7. I'm learning God's will with willingness and honesty, repeatedly, without reservation, in step 6. And then I grow spiritually. And if I do this enough, and I fight these defects enough, then I get to the surrender of God in step 7, and I'm not fighting anyone and everything, and I'm living on a different plane. But where does 6 and 7 actually happen in the directions of the book? They happen in your step 10, which is why I'm a step 10 Nazi, because step 10 is so fucking important to this spiritual growth and getting out of bondage of self. And what is the principle behind step 10? It's perseverance. And then if you want to look it up, it means basically to fight through. So that victory over them, to fight through. Because this is where the action of the program, the awareness, and then my willingness to work this program is in that step 10 process. And why am I doing all this? So that I may better be of service, do thy will. But what I want to highlight here is the word offer at the start of the paragraph and the word may I. Offering is just an offering. May I is a possibility. So there's nothing concrete in this prayer, because you got to do the rest of the work. And then it becomes more concrete. So we thought, well, before taking the step, making sure we were ready, that we could last abandon ourselves utterly to Him. And Bill doesn't mince words in this program, okay? Abandon ourselves utterly to Him. That's pretty powerful words. Abandon and utterly. But it's hard to do that. But I think over time with practice, it becomes easier and easier. But it's practice. And it's time. It's willingness. It's persistency. It's consistency. How bad do you want to change your life? Basically. We found it very desirable to take the spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But it's better to meet God alone than with someone who might misunderstand. The wording was, of course, quite optional, so long as we expressed the idea of voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made an effect, sometimes a very great one was felt at once. So a couple things to that paragraph. The wording was, of course, quite optional, so long as we expressed the idea of voicing it without reservation. So there's a lot of people that don't really dig the literature and the way it's written sometimes because it sounds really like Christian-y. And there's a lot of people that have had, their issues with that idea of God impressed upon them. So I know Jennifer, who's on screen, and I know some other ladies and some men who have written their own step 3 prayers that have really, really changed the person's life that wrote the prayer. So with some good guidance and some willingness to rewrite the prayer, because in this book it said in We Agnostics, don't let spiritual terms deter you of what they mean to you. So we don't get tied into what the old idea of what we thought God was. Don't prejudice the words, the spiritual terms. And if you want to write your own step 3 prayer with depth and weight and meaning, by all means. And that's what it says there in the book. That's what we're talking about. Voicing it without reservation. It can be about Creator. It can be about Mother Earth. It can be about whatever you want it to be. As long as it has a great effect on you, that's all that really matters. And if you can get the depth and the weight and the feeling of whatever the prayer is, because part of prayer, when you first start, a lot of it's mental, but the most important of prayer is to never stop. That's the most important part of prayer, is to never stop. So if it's mental, whatever, that's fine. But eventually, hopefully, it goes from the head to the heart, and you start feeling the prayer. So Ron can feel that prayer when he says his, right? And that's why I do my own step 3 prayers, and they change all the time, because I'm closing my eyes, I'm going deep within myself, and I'm saying my truth, and then it connects because I have the feeling, the emotion behind it, and that's important. It's really important. This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made an effect, sometimes a very great one was felt at once. So I talked about this last week. A lot of people will do this step 3 process, and through this step 1, 2, and 3 process, they gain a lot of momentum and things start changing in their life. Then they say this prayer, and it has a great effect on them. And then they let off the gas pedal because they feel like the drink problem has disappeared or been removed. When we read Fred's story and Jim's story, both of those stories in this book are us. And each of them said all went well for a while. Jim failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life. He was drunk a half a dozen times in rapid succession, just like that. And Fred didn't even make it that far, and he was drunk. Because that's the way it goes. We have spiritual malady. Both Fred and Jim had the spiritual malady, and they both drank, and they weren't really triggered. There wasn't even a cloud in the sky for fucking Fred. Right? He was just crossing the threshold of the dining room. But he had the insane thought that we get, and that's why we need God. If we don't combat the insane thought with the sane thought, we're drunk. It doesn't take much. So we can't let up on step 3, because you don't even have step 3 till you have step 4. Anyone who tells me they have step 3 when they haven't done step 4, they're kidding themselves, because you don't even have a fucking clue what step 3 means. But as we rationalize and justify anything, I can do step 3 my first time in here and tell you I'm turning my will and my life over every fucking day. But I'm not. But I'm going to tell you I am. Don't you know what I know? Yeah, so you don't have step 3 until step 4. So let's get going, and we'll prove it right here. Next, we launched on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning. of which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision, what decision? The decision to turn my will and my life over is a vital, meaning giving of life, and crucial, means imperative step. Yeah, I need this decision to take vital and be important in my life, but it will have little permanent effect. I need the step to have permanent effect, or I'm a dead man. I need this step to have permanent effect in my life. Unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Boom. Blocking me. I need to clear this channel. Remember in We Agnostics? The fundamental idea of God is within every man, woman, and child. But it may be obscured by calamity, pomp, and worship of other things. What a state of mental goose flesh this used to bring on. Had we not variously worshipped people, money, sentiment, things, ourselves. But with no better motive had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or the flower. That's what we need to get back to, that feeling, the sunset, the child that we see with their mother. Like, we're trying to open that up. We try to get out of the mind and into the heart. We need to clear this channel, and it's been blocked. So our liquor was but a symptom. So we had to get down to the causes and conditions. Boom. There it is again for the third time in the book. Our liquor is a symptom. Right? Our liquor is but a symptom. So now we have to get down to the causes and conditions. Here. Now this is what step 4 is about. But before I move on, I want to pull something back out of We Agnostics. And I've been reading this a lot lately on page 50. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, they found that new power, peace, and happiness and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened when? Soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they are making a heavy going of life. Step 4 and 5 is where I see the underlying reasons why I'm making a heavy going of life. And then it says leaving aside the drink question, just like we just read in the 4. Because it's not about the drink. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. And when we get into the meat and potatoes of this, you're going to see why living is so unsatisfactory. Because my difficulties of defects of character make my life very difficult. They show change came over them. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God today is the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. Okay, back to 64. So we had to get down to the causes and conditions. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This is step 4. A business. So you're the business. I was the business when I got here. I was emotionally, spiritually, financially, and mentally bankrupt. And spiritually bankrupt. So I'm the business. A business which takes no regular inventory usually comes in here broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding, fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods and get rid of them promptly without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about the values. The problem is that we've been fooling ourselves about the values our whole fucking life. But now the time has come and we can't fool ourselves about this shit anymore. And if you're taking notes or you're writing anything, I'm going to get you to underline fact finding. And I want you to underline fact facing. And then I want you to underline effort to discover truth about stock in trade. And then I want you to underline one object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods and get rid of them promptly without regret. And why is that so important? It's really important because that is a part of the step 10 process that I keep talking about. When we get to step 10, it's a 5-part thing. And one of the parts is we talk to somebody immediately. So I'll just tell you what it is. You can go there if you want. It's on page 84, but you don't need to. But step 10, and I'm going to always bring step 10 up for the rest of the study. So get used to it because it's important. It's 4 through 9, and we're in 4 now, and we'll be running with the next, 4 steps for a while. And I'll be talking a lot about 10. So what is 10? We continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove it. And then it says we talk to someone immediately. So I want to highlight we talk to someone immediately. Why? Because when I call somebody and when I call a pillar, because I got to be convinced. Remember back in step 3, we have to be convinced that any life run on self-will is hardly a success. I'm fucking convinced. So I got to remember, if I'm running the show, it's probably going down Banana Peel Trail. Especially when I'm early in recovery, I have to pick up the phone. And I still am at 5 years. I saw 2 pillars today. Why? Because I don't want to run my own life. So I went and had 5 hours worth of chats with 2 different pillars to talk about shit I needed to talk to. But, so, continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear when these crop up. We ask God. God's always the first sponsor. Then we talk to someone immediately. And when I talk to this person immediately, like what I was doing today, is I do this. I lay down the facts. Okay? I lay down the facts. And then we face the facts. Then we look at the truth about my situation. Not always my truth, right? Because I will fool myself about the values. So I need an outside perspective of somebody who's God-centered and who's 12-stepped and who gives more of a fuck about my life than my feelings and isn't afraid to push me. So I lay down the facts, I face the facts, I look at the truth, not always my truth, but the truth, based with some help. Effort to discover some damaged or unsaleable good and discard them without regret. And that's hopefully what I'm going to get out of a God-centered 12-step pillar. I'm going to say, you know what, you're working in resentment or you're working in self. I recommend that you don't go do what you're telling me you want to do because you're acting in self. And why? And he's got the background to be able to show me my selfishness. Because if I'm in full-on self, I can't always see it. And 2 of the most cunning pieces of self is self-pity, self-righteousness, and victim. So me as a sponsor, those are the 3 that are the trickiest to spot. Being the victim, which is a form of self-pity, and then self-righteousness. Thinking that I have the right to say something or do something, and I need to talk to my pillar before I go and make decisions based on self that will later place me in a position to be hurt. And if I'm not bouncing this off of somebody, I'm going to go make that decision based on self. And I will get hurt. And then I'll be standing there going, what the fuck did I do? Seemingly they hurt us without provocation. I was just standing here as an innocent bystander and I just got punched in the face. But I really didn't. I wasn't an innocent bystander. I made the decision based on self to impose my self-will on you. And then you retaliated. But I can't really see it. Because he usually doesn't think so. So we did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. As honest as we can. First, we search out the flaws in our makeup that caused our failure. I love that. We searched out the flaws in our makeup that caused our failure. So these flaws are within my makeup. They're deep within me. They're like the thread that makes the shirt. Some of these flaws are just deeply ingrained in me. I just can't see them, which is why it's hard to always identify self. Remember back in step 3, the alcoholic is the most extreme example of self-will run riot, but he usually doesn't think so. And then it goes on to say that we are the problem, and the problems arise out of ourselves. They arise out of ourself, from deep within, is where the selfishness comes from. Because I'm trying to fill a void. I'm trying to fill a void with your love. I'm trying to fill a void with something, always. And that's kind of exactly what this is saying. So I will search out the flaws within me that have been causing my failure. Now we're getting down to causes and conditions. Now I'm starting to look at why I actually drink. Being convinced. There it is again, being convinced. And I told you guys last week to really identify the word convinced in the literature, because it needs to be known as you get to here. There's a whole bunch of convinced in the book, and which means without a fucking doubt. You got to be convinced of these convinced to get to here, because this one's really important. Being convinced that self. Well, am I convinced that selfish self-centeredness is the root of the trouble? I better be convinced that selfish self-centeredness is the root of the trouble, or I'm not going to be convinced of some of this other stuff moving forward. So being convinced that self has manifested itself in various ways is what had defeated us. That's what defeats me. That is the flaws in my makeup that are causing my failure. Just like true Bill W. fashion, he punches it home twice in a row on the same page, like he always does with everything all through the literature. So he's telling me the same thing twice in two different ways. I'm searching out the flaws that cause my failure, and being convinced that self is the problem and it manifests itself in various ways is what had defeated us. Okay. And hopefully I'm convinced of that, because once we keep moving forward through the rest of the program, if I'm not convinced of that, this shit doesn't work as well. And for me, I am convinced. So we considered its common manifestations. That's important too. It doesn't say so we considered every manifestation of self in your life. It says we're just considering the common ones. What about the uncommon ones? So what I want to highlight here is this step 4 isn't the be-all or end-all of fucking inventory. This is a dumping of a bunch of shit. But there's a whole bunch more that come through time. But your typical meeting will talk about how this is all it. This is it. No, this ain't it. More will always be revealed. Like it says on page 164. I'm just going to read it quickly. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. My own house has to be in order through this set of steps, and then more gets revealed. And then I'm able to be useful to the man who is still sick. But obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See that to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. So we considered its common manifestations. There's many more. And just to tie that together, again, before we move on, I'm going to read the first paragraph of step 5 because it just will hammer home this point. So this is the beginning of step 5, and I'm only going to read one paragraph, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Having made our personal inventory, step 4, what shall we do about it? We have been trying to get a new attitude. Step 2. A new relationship with our Creator. The decision, the relationship. Step 3. And have discovered the obstacles in our path. Step 4. We had admitted certain defects. We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. That's important. We're only ascertaining in a rough way what the trouble is. It's all in the literature. And when you look at the black and the white and you understand what it's actually saying, like it says, what I just read, common manifestations, and now in step 5 it says, we ascertain in a rough way what the trouble is. That's it. These are the branches that stick and poke me in the eye. I'm going to be able to see the fucking branches that are causing my failure. But what about all the subtler shit? Why do I have the branches and why do they keep growing back? Where's it coming from? It comes from deep down within. Like it says here. The flaws in my makeup. It comes from deep down inside of me. And I got to figure this shit out over time. But I won't figure that shit out over time in my first year. That's why it's important to get through your first year. Get rid of the substance. Groove the shit in your life. And get this shit grooving in your life. And the next 2 years, if you really groove this program in your life will turn out like fabulous. But so many guys come in here for a quick relief and they groove a little bit of this in the first 6 or 8 months. And then they want to get on with the business of being self-satisfied. They don't really want to help others. They're not really into the service part of it. But they came here sure as fuck to get well. But you know what? You're not well at 6 months or 8 months. You barely even scratched the surface. You got to put a little bit of time in here and do what this path thoroughly followed says, or this shit doesn't work. You know, rarely have we seen a person fail who has followed our path. Actually, what it should say, rarely have we seen a person follow our path. Because that's the fucking truth. Because we all want to get on with the business of being self-satisfied. I came here to get happy, don't you know? And if you come here to get happy, it's a long road. But if you start understanding, you know, you come here, you do this work to strip yourself, rebuild yourself, long period of reconstruction. Why? To be of service. Then the byproduct is happiness. The byproduct is contentment. There's a lot of positive byproducts, but we confuse the ends with the means, right? We want what we want because we're in the second illusion. Okay, so what are these common manifestations of self that cause my failure? Well, the first one is resentment. And it's the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease. For we have not only been mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Okay, that's pretty important. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Well, back in We Agnostics, it talks about here are thousands of men and women worldly indeed. Meaning they weren't spiritual. That they flatly declare that since they have come to believe in this power, there has been a revolutionary change in their outlook, in their way of living and thinking. Because they came in here non-spiritual, and then they got some God in their life, and they became spiritual. So, what does this say? When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. But I don't come in here spiritual. I come in here non-spiritual. And I've always been looking to fix myself before I got here in any other form. Give me mental psychology. Yeah, fuck, let's try that. Give me a psychiatrist. Give me a psychologist. Give me some CBD. Send me to fucking Claire's home. Let me play volleyball and do some CBD fucking treatment center shit. Let me do some online treatment center. Or physically. You know, let's do the workout program. Let's change my life through moral and philosophical comforting ideas. But then you come here and you got to go spiritually, and you know, you've been beaten enough. Alcohol's the great persuader. Finally beat you into a state of reasonableness, and you're on the last house on the block. But it's the only house on the block that actually works. So then you start the spiritual thing when you're new. And then you kind of dig in because you're beaten and you fucking need to do it and everyone's telling you to do it. So you reluctantly kind of start praying and doing these things. And then what happens? You get a little better. You get a little better. You get a little better. And then what happens? Then you get so fucking better doing the spiritual thing that you start going, you know what? I'm going to fucking start working out. I feel so good. My body needs some attention. I'm going to hit the gym like 6 days a week now. And you know what else I need? I need a fucking job. I need a job. I need to get this thing really clicking. And then what happens? The spiritual goes by the wayside. So I start running my life again on mental and physical. And spirituality goes by the wayside. And then within the 6 to 10 month mark, I'm fucking drunk. And what is the real alcoholic cycle as a sponsor that I see as I work with these men? Here's the real alcoholic cycle. In doctor's opinion, it's where restless, irritable, discontent, unless I can again experience the ease and comfort that comes at once by taking the first few drinks. And then I set off the phenomenon of craving. And then I go on the spree. And then I swear off, emerging remorseful, and I swear off. And then this happens again. And again, and again, and again, unless I can experience a psychic change, there's no hope of my recovery. But here's another little twist to the alcoholic cycle, drug addict cycle that I see. with the guys I work with. They go to Renfrew, detox, then they go to treatment, and then while they're in treatment, they get better, then they get the job, then they get the woman, because don't you know those things are really important, and then they get the wheels, and then the wheels fucking fall off, and they're drunk, and they're high, and then they go back to Renfrew, then they go back to treatment, they get better for a while, all things went well for a while, and then they get the job, then they get the woman, and then they get the wheels, and then the wheels fall off again. And that is continued over and over and over and over until lots of them die. And like I was talking about the other day, 2 guys died this week. And then 1 guy's missing. And I know 2 of these guys really well. And selfish, self-centeredness, that's what we believe is the root of our troubles. We must be rid of the selfishness, we must, or it kills us. Well, out of the 3 guys, 2 of them are dead, 1 of them's missing. The 2 that I know, the missing guy and the dead guy, I'm going to say selfish self-centeredness killed them. And so right before Christmas, there was 3 guys that died. 2 of them were my sponsees, and selfish self-centeredness killed them too. In the summer, I had another sponsee die. Same thing. And I could go back and I can keep telling you more and more stories. Because that's it. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we'll straighten out mentally and physically. That's very important. We never let up on the spiritual. It's always number 1. And if you focus on spiritual number 1, everything will always fall into place. Like it tells me here, the mental and the physical will follow after spiritual. Okay? The mental and physical will come, period. It says it here, and it's been my experience. And I see the people that work on the spiritually, they always get healthy physically because eventually they know God wants them to be healthy. And then same with the mental. It all follows. But society's taught us to go the other way, right? But I'm imploring to you, don't go the other way. Don't do what's normal, because if you do what's normal, you're drunk. You got to do what's not normal around here. You got to do what's hard. And it's easy to go the other way, and it's hard to follow the spiritual program of action. But if you want to do what's easy, you're going to be drunk, and your life's going to be hard, or you do what's hard, and your life gets easier. But it takes a little bit of time, takes some practice. Okay, in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. 1, if you want to put a little baby number 1 beside we listed, that's totally cool by me, because that is the first column, and that is the first column that you see there on the other page. So it's one and the same. So 1, we listed the people, the institutions, and principles with whom we were angry. So I'm listing people, institutions, which is banks, treatment centers, insurance companies, government, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on. And principles. I often get phone calls, well, what are the principles that I might be angry with? Well, there's people that are really resentful against like the principle of responsibility. There's people that are really resentful against the principle of fatherhood or motherhood. There's people that are really not happy with the principle of honesty even. And a number of different ones. And it's pretty broad. Okay, so those types of things. Okay, so the little baby number 2 is going to go right after the word angry and we. So we listed people, institutions, principles with whom we were angry. And what I would like you to do if you're sponsoring or you're doing a step 4 is I want you to look up the word angry. Because typically a lot of people just think, well, I'm not angry at that person. But you know what? Anger is a pretty broad word. And if you look up the word anger and see what other words like are anger, it really starts expanding your mind on resentments. And it really starts cutting to the chase of causes and conditions. Because there's a whole bunch of words that mean anger. Like frustration, indignant, blah, 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 blah. There's a whole bunch. And I implore you to look those words up. So anyway, so little baby number 2 is going to be right by we. We asked ourselves why we were angry. That's the second column. Why am I angry? Why am I resentful at the person? What did they do to me? Well, they did this, they did this, they did this, they did that. Well, that's what the second column is about. It's about what did they do to me that made me angry. So I list those things. In most cases, we found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, or our personal relations, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore or we were burned up. And then the little baby number 3 is going to go right before the word on. So on our grudge list. We list, on our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, or our personal or sex relations that had been interfered with? So, now we have the first 3 columns of our resentment inventory. Just like it is in the book. 1, 2, 3. Same as your 1, 2, 3 on the literature where you wrote the little numbers. What I want to kind of highlight here is on the number 2 in the literature, it says we asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, it was found that it was our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. And then in the third column, it says, was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations had been interfered with? So basically, the third column's really, really, really important, but it never really gets the attention that it should get. But it's probably the most important piece of this in the big picture, okay? Because it affects my security of who I am. It affects my relationships. It affects my self-esteem of who I think I am. And when I start looking at all these things on how it affects me as a human being deep on the inside, and I'm talking about the root, not so much the branch. I'm talking about the root. I get to really go in and dig deep and see why I'm insecure in these areas. What is it? Why is it hurting me so deep? But this is just the first go through, right? Like I said, there's much more work to the step 4 process than this first dumping ground right now. But the step 3 column is really, really, really important for me as a sponsor when I'm taking someone through a step 5, because I can see a lot of shit in here. Then we can work on it. So when I do these step 4s and 5s with my sponsees, I'll just give you some information here. I get them to write down the names first. I get them to do column number 1 first. I don't ever get them to do like going horizontally. I get them to do vertically. There is a time and a place for going across, but usually when I'm getting going with somebody, it's straight up and down, and it's always the first column first. Just get the first column done. And then it's the second column. Work on the second column. And in the second column, you'll notice it's got 1, 2, 3 bullet points. His attention to my wife, told my wife of the mistress, and Brown may get my job at the office. So we want them short and sweet. We don't need a storybook here. So we need at least 1 bullet point per name. And I always say maximum 5. Because if I'm going to do the step 5 with this person, we're going to talk about way more than the 5 bullet points. But to not write a novel and not get the person to go in morbid reflection and try to have some speed to this, then, 1 minimum, 5 maximum, and short sentences like this. And then the third column is always going to be, so in the literature at the top of the page, it gives you exactly what you use in the book. We don't make up your own. I don't know how many times I worked with somebody and they made up all their own shit. And then I make them rewrite it. Because we're not fucking doing it your way. Like, I've made guys rewrite their whole step 4s because they went and did their whole step 4 by themselves ahead of me without me. But this is part of the process. Like, fuck you. You're not doing that on your own. And if you want to do it on your own, find a new sponsor. Because that's part of their defects. They probably don't listen. And this process makes you listen. And it doesn't change because this is the path. Thoroughly followed. It's part of the path. So you use these things only: self-esteem, security, ambitions, personal or sex relations. That's it. That's all you use. And then you can write fear beside them if you know that there was fear involved. So then you got your first 3 columns done with your sponsee or by yourself. In the back of the book, it tells me that this whole process, step 1 to 12, should take about 3 or 4 months. It should take 3 or 4 months to do all of this work. It actually says a few months, which means 3. But I'm going to give you some grace and say, 4 months is plenty of time to get all this work done. But you got to remember, treatment centers are treatment centers, and they're in the name of making money, and all due respect to them, they do shit however they want to do. The problem with treatment centers is their shit filters into this program. Like 90 meetings in 90 days. That's fucking nowhere in this book. Like, there's so many things that filter in from treatment centers. Like, step 10 is done at the end of the day. I do my step 10 inventory at the end of the day. No, that's a fucking lie. In the book, it tells me step 11 is where I do my nightly inventory. So there's a whole bunch of shit that comes out of treatment centers that comes into the program and filters in because our rooms are inundated with treatment centers. And then their ideas come in and then they share, and people who are new will hear, and then they think that that's AA. But it's not. And so I, for example, am doing a step 4 with somebody who had already done a step 4 with another sponsor. And this other sponsor just used treatment center worksheets. And the treatment center worksheets, to me, are not right. The treatment center worksheets don't do what this book does. If you just have check marks for self-esteem, security, ambitions, personal relations, and you got 100 resentments, you just start going check, 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 check. But if you have to write the word self-esteem 70 times, and you have to write the word ambitions 70 times, it does something in your psyche. It does something, and it shows you something deeper than a check mark, check mark, check mark. And for example, the other day when I was reviewing this person's step 4 that they had done prior to me hooking up with them, you started seeing the check marks. They went from like check marks to just lines. But that's important shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, this all is important shit. It changes your life. And if it's done properly, it'll change your life forever. But if it's not done properly, you got to keep doing it and people relapse. So I'm a big proponent on doing this right the first time, if we can. Okay, so those are your basic first 3 columns. It's pretty straightforward in the big book. So I've only talked about the first 3 columns, which are really important. And what's important about that is you've already lived the first 3 columns. You know who it is, you know what they fucking did to you, and you know what it hurting you. So when we talk about, I can't do this, well, it's already been done. You know what it is, you know who they are, you know what they did, and you know what it hurt. And if you wait, and if you fuck around on this step, I'll tell you right now, this is the main relapse step of the program. This is where your average person will die if they are in the program, is on step 4. In the rooms, I always hear people afraid of step 4. And then I hear people sharing how scary it is. But to me, it wasn't scary. And it was the step that changed my life. And if I can share a message of strength and hope in a meeting to get people to want to do the step, then I think that's the message that we carry. I don't want to incite fear in somebody new. They're already scared enough walking into a room. So if you have done your step 4 and you're carrying the message, try to twist it up a little bit so that it looks attractive. Because this is the step where people stop and they relapse. We went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. So I look at those first 3 columns. I can see that, it's quite apparent that the world and its people have been fucking me. They've been pretty wrong. That's why they're on my resentment list. To conclude that others were wrong as far as most of us ever got. Yeah, I spent my whole life. That's as far as I ever got. I always knew who you were. I always knew what you did. And I always knew that I was hurt about it. And I never let it go, and I would remember it, and I would build it, and I would build it, and I would build it more. Basically, I'm just making myself sicker. But I didn't know it, because I didn't have any tools. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us, and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have it our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. So I just want to tie that into something, okay? But the more we fought and tried to have it our own way, the worse matters got. So I'm going to flip back to some step 3 stuff on page 61. I'm going to read the second paragraph, and I'm just going to touch on this to tie it in. Well, what usually happens? The show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think that life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself more. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play still does not suit him. Admitting he might be somewhat at fault, he was sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Then, well, let's skip down a little bit. Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? Do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Is he not even in his best moments a producer of confusion rather than harmony? That's kind of what we're talking about. You know, the more that I fight and try to get it my own way, you know, I'm going to redouble my efforts. I'm going to be more kind or more indignant, more gracious, or more of an asshole, depending as what the case is and what I'm trying to get out of the situation. The more I fight and try to have it my own way, the worse matters get. Why? Because I'm running the show. Step 4 is basically trying to show me I'm the actor, trying to run the show. What's step 4 also trying to show me? It's trying to show me that I'm a victim of a delusion, that I can wrest happiness and satisfaction if you guys all just do what I want. And if I can just manage my life my way, and if you guys would just do what I want too, then we'll all be happy. This is what step 4 is trying to teach me. Okay, as in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. It is plain that life, which includes deep resentment, leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. So let's go back to that first line. It is plain that life, which includes deep resentment, leads only to futility and happiness. Think about some of the most miserable people you've ever met. Some older guys maybe that are 40 or 50 or 60 that were just miserable as fuck. Because they're so resentful. They're so resentful at everything. You know, maybe that's even you, but hopefully it's not. But there's somebody in your life that you can remember that is this guy right here. They're so miserable because it only leads to futility and unhappiness. All they do is bitch and complain and blame the world and blame everybody, right? And then this is important. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? It's telling me I can waste my life living in this bitter resentment type of state of mind, blaming you and everyone else for fucking me, or I can change my mind and look at it in a different way. You know, it says that I permit this. Just to the extent that I permit this, do I squander and waste the hours that are actually worthwhile in my life to live? I don't want to live miserably. I want to live happily. I want to live with some joy. I want to actually live. So if I'm living in resentment, for me, it's a total choice. I have the choice today to live in resentment or let it the fuck go. I can live in forgiveness or I can live in resentment. Is it always easy to forgive? No. But do I make a conscious choice to try to forgive all the time? Yeah. Because the person that I'm hating on is living their life anyway. So why do I want to waste my life bitching about something I can never change, or complaining about somebody I can never change? But I can change me. And I'm the one who has to live with me. And if others have to live with me too, then fucking I can do it for me and for them. Because who wants to be around a miserable prick? Nobody. Think about that old guy that we were just talking about. You didn't want to fucking go visit whoever that guy was. And if it was you, no one wants to visit you. Right? But think about the person who just lives life and is just lets shit roll off their back. They're like a pleasure to be around. Those people are great to be around. You fucking knock on their door and they're always happy. You know, shit. They might have been bitch slapped in life, but they just seem to be able to let it go. And it's like, what a gift those people are in your life. I want to be one of those. And it all comes down to changing my mind. I can hold on to this shit with claw marks all over it, or I can do my best to let it go. And when you take the perspective of life, that life doesn't happen to you anymore. Life is happening for you. It's about, what can I learn from this? Because it's like I walk down the street and it fucking starts raining. And then I'm talking to you on the phone and I'm like, it's raining on me. Oh, it fucking rained on me. No, it's raining. That's it. It's not raining on you. It's raining. But we get this attitude like everything happens to you. Everything happens to me. No, things just happen. You're just there. That's it. You know? I'm pretty good now at shit doesn't happen to me. It's not happening to me. People aren't out to get me. The world isn't out to attack me and to ruin my life. There are people that are hurt and they're sick and they try to take their sickness out on other people. And some of them do it to me. People do take runs at me all the time. But the fact of the matter is that I don't even care. Because I know it's not happening to me. They're also sick. Everybody is emotionally ill, spiritually sick, and frequently wrong, just like who? Just like me. And when I kind of get this attitude of everybody's kind of the same, I quit blaming and I quit pointing the finger. But I spent my whole life thinking everyone was fucking me and life was happening to me. And then I did this program and realized no one was fucking me. I fucked me. Up here. I always created up here. Left alone to this too long with no God, you're all on the shit list, right? Anyway, let's keep going. Just to the extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? Some happiness with my kids instead of me being pissed off at my wife, right? I can be happy with the kids. Just because my wife didn't make me supper today doesn't mean I got to take it out on her and the kids for 4 days. You know what I mean? I can just let it go and make my own supper. And fucking the kids are happy as pigs and shit because I'm playing with them. So I'm not squandering the hours. I get to enjoy my life and the kids get to enjoy their dad. You know, this is hypothetical because I burned my life fucking down, so that didn't happen anymore, but at the end of the day. But with the alcoholic whose hope is maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. Yeah, my hope is maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience. That is my hope. We found that it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the spirit, sunlight of the spirit. So what does that mean? I'm shutting myself off from God. If I live in resentment, I'm shutting myself off from God. That's a guarantee. Anything that I'm living in self on, I'm shutting myself off from God. The insanity of alcohol will return, and we will drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. And if we were to live, live. And I don't mean just stay alive. I want to live my life. We had to be free of anger. And as we go through this study, I want you to really pay attention to anger is it's a fucking non-negotiable in this program. Has to be dealt with. We talk about serious character flaws that must be dealt with. Anger is probably the number one out of all of them. And it will say this all through everything we do. So, we had to live, we had to be free of the anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of a normal person who's not an alcoholic, but for the alcoholic, these things are poison. Like, that's one sentence. And it was pretty fucking apparent that anger is not really acceptable for an alcoholic. Has to be dealt with. And anger, as we look at what kind of thinking precedes the first drink, anger takes you from fucking here to here. And all sane thinking is like abandoned. As soon as the unkind tirade goes, or snap judgment, willful snap judgment, we lose all perspective. And we lose like sane thinking in anger. And with that insane like rage and anger, we can also easily make the decision to drink deliberately. And there is no thought of premeditation, like effective defense in the state of anger. You just drink. It's like as fast as you're angry, as fast as you're in the car, and as fast as you're buying a bottle at the liquor store. That's why anger has to be dealt with, because it distorts any sanity you might have. And no one really likes anger anyway. Okay, so we turn back to the list. So now we're getting into the fourth column. We're just going to start touching on the fourth column here. So we turn back to the list, the first three columns. For it held the key to our future. Fuck, beautiful. The key to my future is here. We are prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. Are we prepared to? Or am I going to hold on to my old fucking ideas? Do I want to change? Or do I want to live? I mean, do I want to change and live? Or do I want to live the same old life? So, we begin to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real. Fancied or real. So on this list, most of that shit on my resentment list, a lot of it was fancied. A lot of it was fancied. And like I've been around the program for 5 years. You know, I don't know, that's not that long. But I've hit thousands and thousands of meetings. I've interacted with thousands and thousands of alcoholics. And I can't tell you the thousands of times that a person will make up a story in their head that isn't actually the truth. My sponsees will make up stories in their head that it's actually not even the truth. But left to their own devices, they will take a fucking idea, run with it in the mill, and then a whole story's created. And then they live on this reality that's not even reality. Which is why we need sponsors, and we need pillars, and we need inventory, and we need to do this stuff. Because left to that, I will live in resentment. But yeah, fancied or real, really important. Had the power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered. But how? We could not wish them away any more than we could alcohol. This was our course. So we talk about directions. Here's your directions for this part. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms, they, and the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. Okay, so what is that actually saying? So we realized the people who wronged us, column number 1, were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms. Where are their spiritually sick symptoms? Column 2. And the way they disturbed us. Column 3. So they're sick. Here's their sickness. The resentments that I have against them and what they've done. And how they disturbed me. It affects my boom. That's what we're talking about. Column 1, 2, 3. So column 1 is this. We realized that the people who wronged us in the first column, all the names, are people who are spiritually sick. And they, like ourselves, okay, though we did not like their symptoms, top of the next page. their symptoms of their own spiritual sickness are my second column. Okay? Yeah, and then the way they disturbed us is the third column. So, they like ourselves, we're sick too. So we ask God, here's the first paragraph, here's the first prayer in step 4. It's the second prayer actually in the program. And now in step 4, you start getting inundated with prayers. There's not a lot of prayers in step 1. There's actually none. You could make prayers out of what's there. But the actual prayers, this is the second prayer. The first one was step 3. Now we're into the patience, pity, and tolerance prayer. So we ask God, this is a prayer. So if you guys do get resentful at somebody, here's your go-to prayer. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended us, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How may I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. And you might have to say that prayer 50 times while you're in the presence of that person. But when we talk about a clear cut of directions, following the directions of the program, there's your directions. There it is right there. So let's keep going. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. So here's some more directions. We avoid retaliation or argument. How much more clear can you be? When we're out living this program and someone someone pisses us off, it tells me we avoid retaliation or argument, period. That's it. We don't retaliate. We don't argue back. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chances of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. Okay, so I'm going to tie this back into some stuff that we learned, and there's a solution. So we avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chances of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. So way back, and there's a solution. I got you guys to highlight or circle or do something with the stuff on page 19 at the very bottom of the page. And why I wanted this is because it's very important in the step 10, and we're already talking about it in the step 4. Most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and respect for their opinions are attitudes which makes us more useful to others. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depends on our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. So I like that. Most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings, viewpoints, and respect for their opinions are attitudes that make us more useful. So what that's talking about is, I'm not tolerating you. It's not about love and tolerance like I tolerate you and I just put up with you. It's about love and understanding that you have shortcomings, you have your viewpoints, and you have your opinions, and they may differ from mine, and I accept them from a loving perspective. Bill wouldn't use love and tolerance like a resistant word in the same sentence, which is why I looked into it, and of course he didn't. Tolerance means like, I accept you for whatever flaws you have. And that's what this is saying. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. So I'm going to avoid retaliation or argument, and I'm going to use what we just read. I'm going to understand that this person who I'm going to retaliate or argue against has shortcomings, their own viewpoints, and I need to respect their opinions and keep my mouth shut so I can be more useful to others. And my very life as an ex-problem drinker depends on my constant thought of others and how I may help meet their needs. So if we do, we destroy our chances of being helpful, it says. Yeah. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. That's exactly what I just read. Out of that, there's a solution. Everything just ties together in this program. Anyway, so here's your baby number 4. Fourth column, right here. Referring to our list again. This is where your fourth column is. So 4, referring to our list again. Putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly, and we were willing to set these matters straight. Okay, there's a lot there. So in the fourth column, putting out of your minds the wrongs other people had done to you, which is really, really hard at first with somebody new. Why? Because for me, I lived my whole life thinking you were wrong. And that you did do something, and maybe I was partly to blame, but you were way more to blame. And for me to just take that out of my brain and just ignore that, it's almost impossible. Even if I tell you that I am, I'm still going to think you're 30% wrong and I'm 70% right. Even though I'm going to tell my sponsor, yeah, that's what I'm doing. But I'm not really doing that. This thing even takes time and practice. And actually, through the first number of resentments working with a sponsor, you can actually start doing this. And this is kind of the key to it. So, putting out of their minds the wrongs others had done. So we try that when we first get rolling in this. We resolutely look for our own mistakes. So now I'm trying to look at this from an entirely different angle. I start looking for my own mistakes. Forget what you fucking did to me. I have to forget what you did to me. I'm only looking at what I'm doing. And that's where sponsorship has to be pretty firm. So as I'm sponsoring somebody and they can't really see that truth, I keep shutting them down. No, this is about you. Has nothing to do with them. Even though they might have done some things wrong, they're not off the hook. But we got to look for you. What I'm trying to identify in this fourth column is your selfish self-centeredness, the root of the trouble. So I got to be, as a sponsor, I got to be firm in this area. I got to redirect it. Because left to the sponsee, they want to talk and keep blaming everybody. But I got to keep them in the lines here. So where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? And it says right here, though the situation had not been entirely our fault. And I tell them that. Yeah, it's not all your fault, bro. They're to blame too. But we're not looking to blame. We're just looking to see where you had been selfish, dishonest. So for example, I'm just going to say my ex-wife. She was on my first step 4 list. And I was resentful at her for, not working as much as I thought she could, and maybe spending money and doing, fucking sitting around at home, in my opinion. And my sponsor would be like, well, where were you at fault in that? I'm like, well, I wasn't at fault. I was at work. Well, he'd be like, well, didn't you marry her? I'm like, well, yeah. Why? Well, because I wanted her. Well, there it is right off the bat. You wanted her, so you got to deal with what you wanted. And then, did you ever tell her to go to work? And I said, no, I wanted her to be a stay-at-home mom and be a mom to my kids. And then he's like, then what the fuck are we talking about? You wanted her to be a stay-at-home mom and raise your kids, but you're pissed off that she doesn't work. I'm like, yeah, it kind of sounds ridiculous. And then I'm like, okay, well, changed my mind right there on that one. And then whatever else came out of it, everything that I tried to combat him with, he always had another angle. And then he had me. And it started switching everything in my head. She would go spend money and put money on layaway stuff, but forget where she put money on all the layaway stuff. She'd go and lay away shit all over town and forget that she did it. And then I found out, because she told me, and my dad told me, my kids told me. And then when I was doing my resentment, she was on there for forgetting where her layaway shit was. But part of what I was doing was I was just giving her money anyway, so I could just use and just get her out of the house. So my sponsor's like, so you're mad at her for putting money on layaway things, but you're just giving her money to get her out of the house. I'm like, yeah. He's like, that's fucking ridiculous. So just everything was switched in this process. And in your own recovery, in your own life, there's the same examples that I'm giving you. And I could give you probably, I think I had like 50 resentments on my first step 4. I could give you like 50 more examples if I remembered it, but I don't. So anyway, I got to look where I had been selfish. Where was I being dishonest or self-seeking? And I'm always being self-seeking. That one's pretty apparent. Part of the self-seeking was giving her money to get her the fuck out of the house. Because I wanted to use the house so I could smoke dope. Or I'd give her money so that she would give me a pat on the back and say, what a great husband you are. I never really did anything for free. I always wanted validation somehow out of it. And my sponsor would point that shit out to me. Or I would act in frightened. I'd act in fear. And I would do things in these relationships. You know, maybe I had business relationships with other people where I would do things I didn't want to do. And they would resent me, but I was doing it out of fear that I wouldn't get their work. This stuff goes deep. So I get to see this in my 4th column. I get to see where I'd been selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, or frightened. I get to see the flaws in my makeup that are causing my failure. What are the flaws? Well, I don't want to be financially insecure. So I'll lie a little bit to this business associate because I'm worried that I'm going to lose money. Or I'm going to lie to my wife over something because I want her emotional security. Or whatever. But it all boils down to like my emotional security, companionship, social security within my fellows, and sex relation type stuff. And we'll get way more into that stuff in step 6. Because we're going to really hammer the defect of character, kind of what we're talking about tonight. We're going to really amplify that shit in step 6. Because I do 4 hours on step 6. I read the step 4 and the 12 and 12 on the first session. And then we do step 6 in the second session. And it just ties everything that we're talking about together. Because I think step 6 is the ultimate surrender to start learning what God's will is, right? But I'm learning in this process of step 4 why I'm a failure at life. Why I need to drink. Why... Well, because I'm really thorough on my step 5s, I will get them to do the combination of both of what you said. I'm going to get them to write, well, I was selfish, and then they'll write a sentence why they were selfish. I was dishonest, and then they'll write a sentence why they were dishonest. Or maybe they were dishonest twice, so they write 2 sentences. But I'm not going to get them to write a storybook, but I do get them to do both of those things, Chad. But when I do the step 5, we're going all through that shit. So for me, this is just me, like I've talked about already, my step 5s are pretty much on the average. They're like 8 to 11 hours minimum on a step 5. Why? Because I want to find the real flaws in the makeup, and I really want to dig deep. And I'm going into your parents' lives, and I'm going into your grandparents' lives, because all these flaws that are in your makeup usually come from way back there anyway. And in the step 4, in the 12 and 12, which we'll read when we do 6, I'll just pull out a piece of it. Why I go so far back in the step 5 is because of this. Well, step 4 is a vigorous and painstaking effort to discover what these liabilities in each of us have been and are. What are my emotional, mental liabilities? These are the things that are kind of fucking up my life. So I need to find out what they have been and are. It says it right here. What have they been and what are they now? Meaning I got to look back. We want to find out exactly how, when, and where our natural desires have warped us. How? When? Where? That's important. How did this natural desire? Where did it come from? When did it happen? I got to go back down the train to the beginning of my life and start there and work my way forward. And I got to be looking as a sponsor for the patterns and see what happened. And then it says, where our natural desires have warped us, we wish to look squarely at the unhappiness that this has caused others and ourselves. By discovering what our emotional deformities are, we can move towards their correction. Without a willing and persistent effort to do this, there will be little sobriety or contentment for us. So if you don't work on these character flaws in your early recovery, you won't stay sober. And if you don't work on the stuff as you move on from your initial sobriety, you won't find contentment or emotional sobriety. And, pardon me? 42 and the top of 43 and the 12 and 12 step 4. And since I'm here and we keep talking about the third column, it affects my sex relation, emotional, material security, and companionship. But I can't always see it, right? And that's what it talks about on what I just read. But I didn't read it, but I'll read it quickly now. Yet these instincts, so necessary for our existence, the instincts of sex relation, material security, emotional security, and companionship, so necessary for my existence and God-given to me. I just use them outside of what God intended. So these instincts are so necessary for our existence, often far exceed their proper functions. Powerfully, blindly, many times subtly. So powerfully, under the surface, it's fucking powerful. Blindly, I can't see it. Many times subtly, this shit just pops into my life. How many times have you been doing something, maybe somewhere, and a certain person walks in, and then suddenly, subtly, you're anxious, and you got to get out of there, and you can't even talk, and your whole mood's changed because this person had done something. Maybe they cheated on your partner with your partner, or maybe you cheated on your partner with them, and you're with your partner, or you threw this person under the bus at a job, or they threw you under the bus. And it all relates. All of these feelings, powerfully, blindly, and subtly, came from your insecurity of the relationship in the moment, or your job security, or your financial security. It's some type of insecurity, right? And then so it goes on to say, many times subtly, these things will drive us. Think about that. Drive you, dominate you, insist upon ruling your life. Like with a lot of men and women, the desire for lust will drive you, dominate you, insist upon ruling your life. And then it says, it will often tyrannize us. It causes a lot of pain. But lust isn't just lust by the meaning that you give it, lust. Meaning, I see something and I just want to have sex with it and I always do that and I'm just lustful. Underneath the layers of lust is insecurity, emotional insecurity, and companionship issues and sex relation issues. And when you start getting into the root, because the branch is lust, it's easy to see what the branch is. That's what pokes you in the eye and causes you pain. But where is it coming from? Well, a lot of that shit goes back into your life. Exactly how, when, and where these emotional deformities warped us. Well, maybe my mom wasn't treated right, and I saw what she did, and then me as her son, I react because of what I saw as a kid. Or my dad was a whore, and he just treated women like shit, and that's where I learned it. So then I go back into my life with my sponsees or their lives, and I show them, okay, this is where it is. This is where your emotional deformity warped you. We need to have forgiveness, and we really need to start redirecting your respect for women, and not as a woman, as a human being, because these women are human. So with my sponsees, a lot of them that have this type of issue, I tell them, this ain't about you treating a woman like a woman, because in your subconscious, you're going to treat a woman differently. Because it's ingrained subconscious, powerfully, blindly, subtly behavior. So I say, what I want you to do as you interact with these women is I want you to look at them and treat them like a fucking human being. And you start talking to them like a human being. And be human to them. Because just to tell a guy to treat him like a woman, it's not enough. Because inherently under the surface, they may treat a woman differently than they would a human being. And it's the same with women too. Women have a lot of mind and emotional manipulation tactics that they can draw out of men that they learn through their life. And if you just say, well, to a woman, well, just treat them like a man. No, it's like treat them like a human being. Because women also have these characteristics that they can't see, that they're driven on powerfully, blindly, and subtly. And these things will drive them, dominate them, insist upon ruling their life. And until we work on these things, it says right here, without a willing and persistent effort to work towards their correction, there will be little sobriety or contentment. Why? Because I'm still self-seeking, but I can't see it. I'm still manipulating mentally and emotionally, and it's basically blackmail. And I'm not being in a true partnership. So that's the importance of this step 4 stuff. But it doesn't happen. As you notice, there's a lot of depth here. This shit just doesn't happen through your first time through. Which is why I started the step 4 tonight telling you that we considered its common manifestations and we ascertain in a rough way what the basic trouble is. So in between those two things, there's a lot of fucking stuff under the roots. And through time only, through time and willingness and persistency, and through sponsorship, the stuff really starts healing in your deep subconscious. I've done more healing in my own self through sponsorship than any other way in my life. Because it has magical effects in the subconscious. And don't ask me how, it just works. Okay, we're going to go till 9:15, so we're going to rock 20 minutes, so FYI. You look for your own mistakes. We resolutely look for our own mistakes. And you can write where had we been selfish, and then write the example of selfish. Or dishonest, write the example of dishonest. Frightened or self-seeking, and give your sponsor or yourself some information to go on. And remember, when you're doing this, don't give a shit about how you look to the person. You just get real honest and you write down the truth. Because the more honest you can get with yourself, the better you will be. Emotionally, spiritually. And you need to be well. We need to be well. So we can't, like it said over here, we can't fool ourselves about our values. These values. Because if we're bullshitting ourselves about what we're writing, just so we can look good in the eyes of the sponsor, or make ourselves look better, we're only hurting ourselves. Because we're not getting down to the real causes and conditions. So the inventory was ours. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly, and we were willing to set these matters straight. So there's your 4th column completed. And then you work with your sponsor on that, and you move on to your fears. So now we're going to get into fears. So for me, when I do fears with somebody, I know a couple people do it differently. Jesse does it a little differently than me, but I get you to write down a list of fears. I just want fears. Every fear you can think of, I want to see it on paper. And then I'll kind of get into what I do with the fears. But we talk about as the problems arise out of ourselves, fear is, to me, with 5 years recovery, fear is the number 1 offender. If I don't deal with fear, I go fucking squirrely. So resentment to me are not the number 1 offenders, because I deal with resentments as they come. I'm constantly working a step 10. Resentments don't usually get rooted in me. But fear are the termites that will ceaselessly devour my day. And if they devour a day, they'll devour 2 or 3 days. And I got to deal with fears because they're the number 1 offender to most people who have some time in. But for the new guy, resentments are. Anyway, so notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown and Mrs. Jones, the employer and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. And when we talk about every aspect of our life, we can go back to what I just read in the step 4. Sex relation, emotional, material security, and companionship. Those are the 4 main things. And fear will be the derivative out of those. And then the defects of character, of selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, fear, self-seeking kind of come from those. So the short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was the evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion. I love this. It sets in motion trains of circumstances. Think of that. Trains connected. One little train connected to another little boxcar to another boxcar to another boxcar. Sets in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune, which we felt we didn't deserve. But did we not ourselves set the ball rolling? I like that. So I'm going to make a decision based on self way up the line, but 35 cars later, I'm fucking paying for it. And I'm like, I don't deserve this. I didn't deserve this. But really, at the beginning of this train, I made a decision based on self. Because I was living in fear, or I was living in some type of insecurity, and I make a decision there. But I can't really see this, right? Because I don't have any awareness. But as you become aware, like I always talk about, I always follow the breadcrumbs. So I'm going to say I'm following the boxcars. Oh, there it is. There's the decision I made based on self. And it usually places me in that position to be heard. That brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did we ourselves not set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. Yeah, fear will steal your fucking life. Fear will steal the joy out of your life. Fear will steal relationships from your life. Fear will steal fucking everything from you. And I have examples in my own life where it's actually stole some of the most precious things in my life. And it wasn't just my fear. Because I'm a human and I interact with other people have fear. And I get attached to other people. And then their fears steal fucking their life and things out of my life. And fear will steal jobs from you. Fear will steal people from you. Fear will steal your life from you. So it has to be dealt with. It ought to be classed with stealing because it seems to cause more trouble. Yeah, it steals. It fucking steals your life. And here we go. So a couple sessions ago we did original chapter 5, how it works. And what it talks about is directions. You know, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our directions. Beginning of the study, I talked about this book being about directions. There's not a lot of directions in the first 2 steps. Both those steps are about acceptance. The first real direction we start getting is in step 3. And the direction in step 3 is quit playing God. It doesn't work. And get the simple relationship straight with God. It doesn't tell me how to do that, but it's telling me I better get that part straight. So now we go into the step 4, and I wanted to bring this up last week when I was talking. Step 4 is the beginning of where my directions start. Okay? I get an inventory process in resentments. I do my first 3 columns, and then the 4th column I start seeing shit from an entirely different angle. When we get into step 10 is the meat and potatoes of my recovery. Once I get up there, that step starts becoming the most important piece of my recovery in many respects. And one of the components of step 10 is it asks me to be aware of selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And when these crop up, we ask God to remove it at once. We talk to someone immediately. We make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. But in that first little 4-piece thing, it says we continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Well, I got a whole piece on resentment. I can deal with resentment no matter what for the rest of my life, because I have it in the big book Alcoholics Anonymous, and it showed me exactly how to deal with resentment. And the fourth column is really important, and we talked last week about the third column being severely important. And we talked about this step 4 stuff is, these are the common manifestations of self. And being convinced that self is the problem that causes me most of my problems. So I got to be convinced that I'm actually the problem. And then once I look at the literature, it says being convinced that self manifests itself in various ways is what has defeated me. That's what defeats me. It's not my drinking. Every newcomer soon realizes for himself that his instincts gone astray has been the primary cause of his destructive drinking and failure at life. Unless he is now willing to work hard at the elimination of the worst of these defects or decisions based on self, both peace of mind and sobriety will still elude him. That all the faulty foundation of his life will have to be torn out and built upon a new bedrock. So we're talking about in step 4, we're finding these failures, these things in myself that cause me to fail in my relationships and in life. Because it's through my relationships, my twisted relations with family, friends, and society at large that usually cause my problems. But really, it's my relationship with me. So we start learning this shit in the third and fourth column. So if anyone missed last week, which was a pretty good week, because we spent 2.5 hours on 3 pages talking about resentments, third and fourth column, I'll have that on YouTube in like a week. Now we're going to get into the fears. Because all of the resentments that I have actually stem from the fear. Okay? You might not be able to connect all those dots here today. And then when we get into the sex conduct, every bit of my sex conduct comes from fear. And the sex conduct is where, for me as a sponsor, if I'm sponsoring you, I can't wait to get into the sex conduct stuff. And I don't mean that like from a sadistic point of view. I mean from a helping point of view. Because I can see in your sex conduct really, usually, where most of your troubles are. And we talked about last week when we read that piece of the 4 in the 12 and 12. My desires for sex relation, emotional, material security, and companionship cause me most of my troubles, practically all the trouble there is. And those things really get highlighted in these relationships over the course of my life. And we talked about wanting to find out exactly how, when, and where. These things warped me. Where in my life did this stuff start? I want to look squarely at the pain at some point in my life, and I got to kind of backtrack and look for this stuff. And then, just to finish off before I get going in this new reading, I flipped to the step 5 and I read, well, what does it say at the beginning of step 5? Well, it says I ascertained in a rough way what the basic trouble was. Well, I've only ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is doing my step 4. There's deeper shit, and that's what we're talking about. It's in the third column. But this step 4 we do in Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous through the big book. It dumps the biggest shit out of your way so you can start clearing the channel. The whole point of this is to clear the channel of God that resides within me. So I need to keep this channel clear. When we did step 2, we talked about the fundamental idea of God resides within every man, woman, and child, but is often obscured by calamity, pomp, and worship of other things. Well, that's what we're learning here. We're learning where I'm obscured with life's calamities, pomp, which is self, and worship of other things. What else am I worshiping? In the sex conduct, you'll see that you worship like ideas, sentiments, men or women. The stuff gets pretty deep, but this the first time through is very important, and then staying sober is really important because the rest of it comes over time. And if you don't stay sober, then you just stay sick. But if you stay sober and you keep digging in, because this is the beginning of a lifetime practice, you keep digging in, you start letting more go, you start letting more go, And before you know it, within a year or two, you're like, holy fuck, do I ever feel good? Why am I not fighting life? Why am I not fighting my own head? Why am I not fighting the people in my life I've always fought? It's because you're healing. You get better, you get well. But it takes more work. It takes willingness to look deeper. I think one of the biggest things that we don't do, which causes a lot of people pain, is we don't tell them that this is continual. When you go to a meeting, anyone who's here, you guys know when you go to a meeting, all we're talking about is fucking alcohol and drugs. That's not even the problem. It tells me in the book. That's a symptom. So for me, anyone that knows me, when you hear me at a meeting, I'm hardly talking about the substance. I'll tell you that if you don't deal with the shit we're talking about, the substance will be in your life. That's a fucking guarantee. But the message that I want to carry, that our group is going to carry, is the problem isn't the drugs. It's selfish self-centeredness. It's all of these little things that actually make me want to drink, that cause this. And when I can't handle enough of this, then I pick up one of these, and I'm fucking drunk and high, and then I'm off to the races. So, to me, this is the meat and potatoes. Step 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12. 9's important too. So when I did my first fear inventory, when I was new in this program, I wrote out about 50 fears. And I didn't know what I was doing. So I go through these 50 fears, and then I realized that like 10 of them were kind of legit, but the other 40 were just shit I made up in my head. But the 40 that I made up in my head drove 90% of my life. And I was very restless, irritable, and discontent. And then when I looked at the 10 that were actually good fear, they were God-given fears to help me stay alive. Give me self-preservation. Protect me in a legitimate way, not in a fucking ego, fearful way. And we'll kind of get through that here. So normally what I do with my sponsees, I know people do fears a little bit differently as they sponsor. How I do it is I get the sponsee to write down all their fears in one list. I want to see every little fear, from like fear of spiders, fear of dogs, fear of driving, fear of making, U-turns, whatever. I don't really care what it is, but I want you to give me every fear. And then most people have the fear of being in a relationship and not being in a relationship. Fear of relapsing, fear of dying, fear, like any kind of fear. I want to see all the fears, every fear you have. And then we go through all the fears. And what do I actually do with the fear? I ask you, is it rational or is it irrational? Is it God-given fear or is it made up in my head? And so one of the first questions I'll ask them, is it rational or irrational? And then they got to think about it, because we've never thought about it before. And then, so the person might say, well, it's a rational fear, and let's take an example of what kind of fear would be a rational fear. A plane. Getting in a plane crash is a rational fear. And I'm like, okay, so that's a rational fear to you. But when you look at the facts, plane travel is probably the safest way to travel on Earth. But you're not afraid to get in your car. Okay, well, aren't most people that die in any type of travel dying in a car? Like, you got way more of a chance of dying, jumping in your car and driving outside your door than you ever would jumping on a plane flying anywhere in the world. And once somebody hears like the logic behind that and the actual facts, they start going, holy shit. Yeah, and I'm not afraid to drive in my car, even though more people die in car crashes than almost anything, right? And so that's the kind of thing we're talking about. Fear of dying. Well, everyone's gonna die. The Creator, one thing's guaranteed if you have life. The other thing that's guaranteed is your guaranteed death. But part of our belief system is we're afraid of death because society creates this fear of death. And so we talk about these different types of fear, and we really get into the nuts and potatoes of what these fears are. So anyway, I'm going to read. So this is the first step. We write down the fears. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. So I asked the person, well, why do you have the fear? And then they tell me why they have the fear. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. Perhaps there is a better way. We think so, for we are now on a different basis. That's really important because now I'm on a different basis. I made a decision in step 3 that I want to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. And I'm convinced that any life run by me is not successful. Easier said than done. But this is what we're trying to do. We're on a different basis. The basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role that He assigns. So we talked about that when we did the step 3 prayer. Having a new employer, being all powerful. He will necessarily provide for us if I do 2 things. I got to stay close to Him and perform His work well. And we talked heavily about working for God. And wherever I go, I'm playing a role. So I'm a father to 3 daughters. When I go father them, I'm playing a role of being a father. Because my real employer is God, and I bring the vision of God's will into my fatherhood. And if you're a wife or a husband, then when you're at home with your spouse, you're a wife or a husband playing the role of a wife or a husband. And you bring the vision of God's will into your activities. And as we follow this process, that's what we're talking about. And I'm going to give you, as we live in fear, there's clear-cut directions here, and I'm going to show you, if you get into fear, what you do. Okay? So we're here to play the role He assigns. Just to the extent that we do as He think He would have us, and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. So I like that. Just to the extent that we do as He think He would have us, and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality is the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let Him demonstrate through us what He can do. That's key. This is what we're doing. We're letting Him demonstrate through us what God can do. And here's our directions. So, what do? I ask Him to remove my fear. And then I direct my attention to what He would have me be. So if I get into a situation, and let's just say I had a spouse, and then I was chatting with her, and I got into fear of whatever it was, I realize I'm in fear. And then I go, okay, God, I ask you to remove the fear. And then I remember, direct my attention to what you would have me be. Notice it doesn't say what would He have you do. It's what would He have me be. Most people will think, well, what's He going to have me do? He's going to have me do this, and He's going to have me do that, and He's going to have me do this and that. The problem with going that way is a lot of those things that you would think that you should do are based on a decision based on self, because you're trying to please somebody. So it doesn't say what would you have me do. It's what would you have me be. Okay, well, in an instance, God's going to have me be strong. He's going to have me be integral. He's going to have me be truthful. He's going to have me be loving. He's going to have me be walking forward with Him as my guide in that moment. So I don't need to fall back into fear and start managing my life to kind of walk on eggshells around the person who I'm working this fear out because of. Because if I go into what he's going to have me do, I'm going to try to start manipulating and managing so that this person doesn't get mad at me, or so that they're not like judging me or whatever it is. So it's important for us to think about, what are you going to have me be? Because that's the most important thing. And I work with a lot of people on this one, and I think this page 68 stuff is the keys to the kingdom. And really it's a three-part thing for me. It's about, why do I have the fear? And is it rational or irrational? And I got to really kind of dissect that shit. And then once I look at the fear and go, it's probably made up, then I go down to this, what we just read, and I'm like, I ask God to remove the fear and direct my attention to what he would have me be. Okay, so now I'm going to flip this into step 10. Well, in step 10, and I'll be talking about step 10 forever. In step 10, and it says, we continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Okay, let's take the fear. Well, I got a fear inventory. If I need to deal with fear, it's right here. But in the step 10, it says fear, and then it says we ask God to remove it at once. That's what it says in step 10. So it says the same thing right here. And then in step 10, it says we talk to somebody immediately. So I have the fear, I ask God to remove it, and then I pick up the phone and I start talking to my pillar, or my 12-stepped God-centered pillar, not just any pillar, and or sponsor, and I start talking to them about the fear that I had. And through this conversation of the fear, I can look at the facts. So again, I'm going back to what it said in step 4. This is a fact-finding, fact-facing truth about stock and trade, an effort to discover some damaged or unsaleable good and discard it without regret. That's what will always happen when I pick up the phone. So if I'm living in fear, I call my sponsor and I'm like, yeah, this is what's happening and I'm fucking scared shitless and blah, 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 and this is what I'm doing right now. I asked God, and now I'm calling you. And no, I don't need to make an amend because I haven't done anything yet, but I'm pretty fucking nervous. So he's like, okay, well, tell me everything. So then I tell him everything. I tell him the facts. And then him and I face the facts. Then we look at the truth about this situation. Because me, left to my own devices, I'll blow this situation up into fucking anything. And then he sees it from a different perspective and helps me go, fuck yeah, dude, you're right. I was totally going off track. And then he's like, so now let's pray for that person. And you're living in this fear and you don't know an amend, but let's discard what your selfish part is. And then we discard it and I move on and I work it out. And then I'm not fighting anyone or anything, even alcohol. So I don't fight myself anymore. And then I don't need to take it out on you. And if I'm not fighting me or you, then I'm not going to fight alcohol. Because I only need alcohol because I fight myself and I fight you. And I create this whole fucking spiritual malady. And I need to fucking stop the madness in my head. So I pick up a drink. Because I get ease and comfort that comes at once by taking the first few drinks. But I start learning how I get ease and comfort by asking God for help. Because God is my ease and comfort. And through my first process, asking God to remove it, talking to somebody, they'll help me just direct me to God. And so that's really important. And then it says, at once we commenced to outgrow fear. What the fuck are we talking about? That's all we need to know. This isn't just going to happen overnight though, because fear is the evil and corroding thread. And it is going to set in motion trains of circumstances. And it doesn't happen as soon as you just start working this program. Because fear is subtle. It's in the subconscious. The fabric of my existence is shot through with it. But as you start understanding how to identify what you're thinking and what you're feeling, and your body will always tell you. Once you get in touch with your body and yourself, your body is always going to tell you when something's wrong. So like, for example, I don't know if she's on here right now. She's not. But somebody who I was just talking to before I got on the meeting, why I was late, is because this person like a year ago, would have had this feeling and would have just shoved it under the carpet and never would have thought about it. But because she's leveled herself up and cleaned so much house, she's rising and vibrating at a higher level. She's like, something's not sitting right in me. And she reached out and called me. And she's like, I don't know what it is, but something's not right. And so we started unpacking everything, asking her all these different questions. But her body told her that something's not right. And then as we kind of, we dig into the pain and unhappiness, we kind of start connecting the dots, and we start trying to expose what it is. And then she takes it to prayer and meditation, and then we'll talk about it tomorrow and see what happens. But her body told her what was wrong, and she reached out, and she's going to discern this with God. And it's basically the God consciousness within her trying to help her fucking get through something that she needs to get through and learn the lesson that she needs to learn. But a lot of it came through fear. But the thing with feeling the feelings inside of us, our brain will want to figure out why I feel like this. And my experience is my brain can't always understand what's wrong inside me. But my brain wants to say, yes, I know what's wrong. And my brain wants to say, you know what, sponsor, this is what I think it is. But I've learned that usually, at least 50% of the time, my brain is fucking wrong. I got to go deep inside and close my eyes and get into a place of meditation for 5 or 10 minutes and really start talking to that feeling. And when you have the negative feeling of fear, because fear is a feeling, you'll feel it. It's a negative ball of energy, and you'll feel it either in your chest or in your stomach or in your sides. And then once you feel it, I want you to stop, get in tune with it, and feel it. And like touch it wherever it is on your body, because it's there. And all it is it's a negative block that's going to fucking block your heart. And that's part of the problem. And when we block our heart too much, we can't let the grace of God shine in. And this program is about unblocking the heart, unblocking that untapped inner resource. So when you do have fears, you're moving forward in your guys' recovery, remember, holy shit, I feel that feeling. Stop. Honor that feeling. Say, what are you doing here? And I don't mean from your head. I mean, stop and get in touch with true self and go, you know what? What are you? Why are you here? What is it that you're scared of? And it's going to tell you if you're listening. And the more that you do that, the more you can get in tune with it, and the more you won't fucking suffer from this disease. Because this shit will start fucking allowing you to just let shit go, and it just becomes a working part of your mind and your heart. So I know that might sound a little deep and a little crazy, but it's just the truth. It's the truth, man. But it takes time. The shit takes time. But you got to stay sober. That's why I keep saying it. Stay sober. Don't let off on your spiritual program of action after a year. That's all I got on fears. I'm going to move on to sex conduct. I could do more comprehensive thing on fear, but I probably won't do it today. But maybe another day. Now about sex. This is the one subject that never gets brought up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Never gets brought up as a topic. Hardly is ever talked about. Once in a while at a men's meeting it'll be talked about. But it's very quiet because no one wants to talk about sex. Even sponsors who do step 5s will usually skim over this because everyone's so fucking scared to talk about sex because it makes everyone vulnerable. And then you get to see a lot of truth. So the sponsor doesn't want to fucking really know much about the sponsee's sex conduct because it makes everyone uncomfortable. But when you do this enough, like I've done so many step 5s, I start realizing no one's really different than each other. Everyone's the same. So if you're sponsoring and you're going to do sex conduct, just pray before you do it, because there's so much valuable information to help somebody in the sex conduct, because most of the behaviors are in here. And most of the behaviors that come and play in my resentments and everywhere else in my life, you can see them in the sex conduct. And like, the cool thing about me is when I work with my sponsees, I don't even care. I can talk openly about sex conduct because it's part of human nature. And I'm not here to judge. And the people that I work with, they fucking open up. And the relationship gets actually strong because we're able to talk about shit you can't ever talk about. What does everyone want in their life? Everyone actually wants to be vulnerable in a relationship, right? Everyone wants to be vulnerable in a relationship. That's all we really actually want. But what's the scariest thing? To be vulnerable. So that's why I always tell my sponsees, the first relationship we're going to build right now in your life is yours and mine. Why do I want to say that? Because Bill tells me in the step 4 in the 12 and 12, the primary fact that we fail to recognize is our total inability to form a true partnership with any other human being. And that's my experience in my own life and with every sponsee I've ever worked with. Why? Because every sponsee and myself are selfish, self-centered to the core, but we usually don't think so, and we think we're fucking all these other things. But when I start working with you, you start realizing that I'm going to tell you you're selfish and self-centered if you're in Alcoholics Anonymous, because you probably are. And I need you to fucking start working on the number one relationship is you and your sponsor. It's not you and your husband or you and your wife, really. It's you and your sponsor. And once you can really connect with you and your sponsor, then you guys can start working on other relationships. But most people aren't really good at relationships in this program. That's just the facts. I'm not saying that for any other reason than it's a fact. And once you accept the fact, then you can start fixing it. So now about sex. Many of us needed an overhauling there, but above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off the track. Here we find human opinions running to the extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow a man no flavor for his fare, meaning all sex all the time. Meaning no sex at all. And the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet, which means sex is fine all the time, whatever you can get. We want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. And that's what I always say. I don't want to be the arbiter of your sex conduct. I don't even actually give a fuck. But if I'm asking you questions, it's all in the benefit is I need to help you. I need to understand what drives you, what motivates you. Why do you do the things you do? We talked about in the step 4 in the 12 and 12. Powerfully, blindly, many times subtly, these things will drive us, dominate us, and insist upon ruling our lives. What are we talking about? Well, my desire for emotional security, my desire for companionship, my desire for sex relation, my desire for security within my fellow peer group. Like, there's a lot of people I work with that are really, really afraid of not being accepted by your fellow human being peers. And people will sell themselves out to be accepted. And they'll go against their own true self so that they can be accepted from outside themselves. And some people don't love themselves enough to not be by themselves. Some people can't be by themselves. And they need someone else in their life to validate them. And they'll do anything to make that shit happen. People will sell their own souls to fucking have someone in their life so that they don't feel alone, even though they're going against a lot of what they believe. Powerfully, blindly, many times subtly, these things drive us, dominate us, insist upon ruling our lives, and at some point they will tyrannize us. Why do we do the things we do? You know, if you and your friends are, this is what I've seen, you can have a group of women in the rooms, and then some hot guy comes in, and then all the women change. And they went from being like all happy and giddy to like, oh my God, now they're fucking doing their hair and fucking, getting up and walking around. And like, what is that? That's what we call powerfully, blindly, and subtly. These things will drive you, dominate you, insist upon ruling your life. And then at any cost, some of these men and women, don't get me wrong, it's not just women. Men do the exact same thing. But they change the minute they see this woman or women in general. And why? It comes from somewhere. Right? And even guys will like throw their best friends aside for a woman they've never met. People do that kind of shit. But why? It's because we're insecure. Well, why am I insecure? Well, I don't know. But this is what we find out over time. We start finding out why. Why am I willing to throw my best friend to the fucking curb for somebody I haven't even met? Why am I not comfortable in my own skin to just speak my own truth? Why do I got to accept all this other bullshit that this person brings into my life, even though I don't really like it? Why? And we do that all the time. Because we're not full. We're not complete. And again, I'm going to talk about step 7. Tradition 7. Because each step in each tradition correlate exactly to each other. We just don't understand what they actually mean. So I'm going to explain tradition 7 and step 7 like I have already before. Tradition 7 is we are self-supporting through our own contributions, declining outside contributions. And then they pass the basket around so that we can put money in it. But there's way more to it than it being about money. It is self-supporting through its own contributions, declining outside contributions. Well, what about me in step 7? I need to be self-supporting through my own contributions from self and God, declining outside contributions to make me feel whole. The whole emphasis on step 7 is to be whole. I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad, God. Please remove every single defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. I have surrendered to God. I am whole. And that's what we're talking about. Why do I need all these things outside of me to make me feel whole? It's because I'm fractured. I'm broken. And I need things from outside of me to fill up what's wrong. And for me, I spent my whole life seeking money, stuff, status. I sought my peer, like my thing was I liked security through status. I wanted all my peer guys to know how awesome I was at work and how awesome I was at building a business and how I could come with a grade 11 education and have 15 trucks around the city of Calgary and my pockets were overflowing and my house, my $1 million house in Chestermere was a byproduct of my pride so that you could all see how awesome I was with what I had to build it with, which was nothing. But that validated me. And so I was held up by the world of the material based on what you guys thought I was. And then as you guys think I'm this, then I need to live up to whatever that is. Even though sometimes I didn't agree with what you told me I was, but then I made the deal with it. And I never was always true to myself. And then I felt that, which is why I was still restless, irritable, and discontented. And I always needed something else. So yeah, we have those 4 columns, blah, blah, blah. We kind of get to see the truth about what we're doing in those 4 columns. We talk with our sponsor about it. We get the feedback. We see where we're needing some work or some help. We get to see that 3rd column in resentment, why I do these things. Where is this stuff stemming from? Sex relation, emotional, material security, companionship. It all gets really highlighted in the sex conduct. through a discussion with the sponsor. And I don't mean a confession. I mean a discussion. And then once we get this done, it says, okay, we got this all down on paper and we looked at it. Then what does it say? In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal of our future sex life. We subjected each relationship to the test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to help us mold our ideas and help us live up to them. So with my sponsees, this is really important. It tells me right here. Here's the directions. In this way, once I get all the data from my sex conduct to see what I'm doing, I ask my sponsees, I'm like, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to write out a list of exactly what you want in a partner from your heart. What do you really want from somebody? And then they write it and they say, well, I just want someone who's loving, who's kind and caring, who has my back no matter what. You know, everyone wants the same shit. And then it says, okay, so I ask them to do that. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. That's what we're doing. This is really important to you people. For the ones I work with, it's really important to develop a sane and sound sex ideal of your future sex partner. And it's more of a relationship thing. It's not a sex thing. And it's not a shopping list. It's about principles and what do you want in a person. And then it says, we ask God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. That's clear-cut direction. I'm asking God to help me mold my ideal and help me live up to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask God, this is what I want, but then it flips on me and that's what I'm to live up to. So then let's just say you have 10 things on your safe and sound sex ideal, relationship ideal. As you live your life now and you meet somebody, maybe they check 6 boxes. Maybe they check 5 boxes out of the 10 that you had on your list. Well, is 5 enough? No. But if you looked at your life in your past life, you probably settled with 2 of the boxes checked. Or 3 of the boxes checked. So for me, with my sponsees, it's like, okay, is 6 enough? Probably not. 60% of my 100% is probably not enough. Now, if we get into the 7 out of 10 boxes, now we're talking. So it becomes, you don't even need to like weed through the weeds. It's like a 7 or greater. And if they're not checking off the 7 boxes, then it's a no-go. Even though they might be hot, they might have a job, they might have all of these things going for them, but they don't have what you need on your safe and sound sex ideal. And you ask God to help you live up to this. Why? Because it's based on your behavior. And it's based on your actual needs from deep down inside of what you actually want. Not from the surface level that we've lived with for many years. We get in touch with true self and what we really want. And we start going with that. And then you save yourself years of fucking bullshit. You might have to stay single a little longer. But if you wait and you're patient, you're going to find what you actually really want. But if you're impatient and you can't handle it, you're going to settle for anything. And then you're going to be single again. And you're going to go through the same cycle like you always have. Because that's the pattern. And that's, you keep doing what you always did. You get what you always got. If you want something that's different, then you have to do something that's different. It's simple. Not easy. Why? Because the desire for sex relation is so powerful. The desire to not be alone is so powerful. So what do I always say? I always say do what's hard, make your life easy. Or do what's easy and make your life hard. And if it was easy, everyone would do it. So... yeah, it's important shit. It's important shit. This is the shit that takes you to God. This is the shit that launches you to the 4th dimension. This is where we talk about in step 11. When our thinking is cleared of wrong motives, we'll raise our level of consciousness. Our thought life is placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. Okay. So we remembered that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow towards it. That's important. You must be willing to grow towards it. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, which will come in step 8, so don't get too ahead of yourself, provided that we do not bring still about more harm in doing so. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answers will come if we want it. And there's some more clear-cut directions. God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsels with persons is often desirable. That's important. It says counsel with people is often desirable. It means talk to your God-centered 12-step pillars. You know, the biggest mistake I see that the men make that I work with is they most relapses for most men always because of opposite sex. Always. And you know, because of this, a lot of them die because they can't work on this area. There's a line in step 7 that says, as we reluctantly come to grips with those serious character flaws that made problem drinkers of us in the first place, flaws that must be dealt with, or we retreat into alcoholism once again. If I don't deal with these serious character flaws, these insecurities or whatever it is, sex, lust, women, I'm fucking as good as drunk, and this shit can kill me. Delay is dangerous and rebellion may be fatal. Straight out of step 6. Delay on working on these things is dangerous. Rebellion, full-on rebellion of this shit, may be fatal. So it's important to discuss this shit. And like I always tell my new sponsees, you know, usually within their first year, come talk to me. Talk to me about your relationships. Talk to me about who you're going to date. I'm not here to like control your life, but I'm here to care about your life and give you some direction based on my experience. And some people will take it and others won't. And the ones that don't, and this isn't a disrespect to them, they usually get drunk. But the ones who dig in, they level up. And then they find good partners. But we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical or thinking or advice. Suppose we fall short on the chosen idea and stumble. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but it's only a half-truth. This is important. It depends on our motives. And if we are sorry for what we have done, and we have an honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and we will learn our lesson. If we are not sorry, and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are fucking facts out of our experience. This paragraph is facts out of my experience as a sponsor. You know, if you stumble, are you sure to drink? No, not necessarily. If you're willing to change and work towards correction and be better, no, not necessarily so. But if your conduct continues to be selfish and inconsiderate, you are probably going to drink again. Why? Because you're missing the fucking mark. You're missing the mark within yourself. The God guidance system will tell you what's right and what's wrong. But it takes time to clear that thing and listen to it because it's a voice that's so quieted by life's calamities, pomp, worship, fear, and all these things. It's so quiet you can't hear it. But every now and then you do hear it. We've all heard it. Oh, there was something inside me that told me not to do that, but I did it anyway. And look where I'm at. I'm fucking in jail. Or wherever. Like, we all know that voice. And that voice will never, ever guide you wrong. And we don't even know the voice because we've never been in touch with it. Our society wants to fucking cap that off so we don't even hear it. Why? Because they want us to buy the shit. They want us to do this. They want us to do that. You start listening to that voice inside you, You won't ever go wrong. You will never need to justify anything you do ever in your life. You will never need to set a boundary in your life because that thing inside you already knows what your boundaries are. But it takes time. It takes time. And me as a sponsor, my job, what I've taken on, is it's not about the drink or the drug. My job as a sponsor is to let you find that voice inside you, and hopefully you're willing to put the work in, and hopefully you're willing to fucking listen to my ass rip your ass apart once in a while, because that's what I want to see happen. Because I want you to pass that on so somebody else can find who they truly are. What would you be like if you actually knew who you truly were? That's a two-sided question. First, you got to find out who you actually are now. Then you got to ask yourself, who do I actually want to be? And you can be that. And most of us, everyone gives the same answer. And it all comes from the heart. But most of who I am now comes from the fucking head. So we got to start trying to learn to listen to that heart. Because the heart will always tell you. Always tell you. Okay, so if we are not sorry, our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. Yes, we are not theorizing. These are definite facts out of my experience as a sponsor. To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal. Here's some more clear-cut directions. To sum up about sex, we earnestly, deeply pray for the right ideal. For guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and for strength to do the right thing. If sex is troublesome, we throw ourselves harder into helping others. That is exactly what I did. And that's what I still do. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves and it quiets the imperious urge, when to yield would mean to heartache. If we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments, and we have begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill towards all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. In this book you will read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. If you have already made a decision and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, you have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. Boom.